Hi, welcome back. Thank you for bearing with us, and kudos to being here and being inspired and being curious for more inspiration. This is the last panel of this conference, and I would like to introduce the panelists or the speakers. So today our topic is communities organized around comics and communities for women, by women, challenging systems, involving everyone and challenging systems together. And so the panelists next to me is Jana Adamović, who is a comic book author and illustrator from Serbia, works for international markets, and has created comics on diverse topics like the refugee crisis, climate change, women's rights, auto fiction, and she is the co-founder of the Stripotetka Comics Collectives, or in English it's Comic Ontes collectives, about which we are going to hear a lot more. Next to Jana we have Dragana Radanović, also from Serbia, who is a researcher and visual storyteller, and her PhD dissertation is in a comics form, and she uses comics to investigate the representation of childhood and also tell a story of childhood. Check out the Instagrams of all of these ladies here. Next to Dragana, we have Eva Hilhorst from the Netherlands, who is the initiator and the editor of the Drawing the Times website, which is also a collective bringing about change in communities, as we learned today. And next to Eva, we have Nicola Streeten from the UK, who is an anthropologist, comics artist, graphic novelist, academic, who initiated the LDC community, they also bring about intervention and change. And next to Nicola, we have Rita Fürstenau from Germany, who is an editor, illustrator, and she founded Rotopol, the publishing house Rotopol, in 2007. And as we have learned 20 minutes ago, they are bringing comics together with art and performances and creativity and found objects. So everybody here on this panel is doing a lot. Yeah, I'm Eszter, Szép. I'm impressed by these ladies. That's what you need to know about me. And I also try to encourage comics creation in Hungary. So the WOMCOM project has so far focused on the Balkans, 6 countries from Southeastern Europe, and this discussion opens up our existing discussion to the rest of Europe. And so my first question is related to the Balkans, the intervention that you girls, Dragana and Jana, have started in Serbia. And as Serbia has a diaspora in the Western Europe, it is a very international community already. So may I ask you to introduce Stripotetka to us? What do you do and what do you want to change?
Okay, so first of all, thank you all for inviting us here in Ljubljana. We're very honored and to talk and present a little bit about our collective. So a few years ago, a couple of us artists, girls, came together because we realized that we couldn't really live any longer in our very patriarchal society without trying to be proactive and making a change. So we really wanted to not just sit and complain and wait for somebody to give us a chance, but really to be proactive about it and do something about it. And I will just have to do a little nod to Nicola when she was talking about how they created LDC Comics and the funny name. That's something very similar that we actually did. So Stripotetke, tetka means auntie. And we wanted to do a little play on the words of auntie and comics, because aunts are somebody who they can either be like very nagging female, like negative, in a negative view, nagging female figures, which is how we were in the first perceived by our comic community. And we wanted to take that and empower it with humor and make our collective into a group of, although we are most of us pretty young still, but we've been on the scene for a very long time, and we are perceived as role models to a young budding generation of girls, and not just girls, boys as well. So we wanted to, become like role models, and in January we were going to commemorate 2 years of our collective being official, and in 1 year we've managed to publish 2 books, one on the mental load and just the gender gap in paid and unpaid work. That book is called Kod kuće, or At Home. And another one called Breaking the Silence, which is telling stories of intersex people who are born intersex, so with some kind of variety, and who are very much invisible in our society and in the world as well. So Dragana, if you want to add something in there.
I would just say that Stripotetke basically grew from the idea that there is no community for women in Serbia, and we couldn't find each other because also practices of exhibiting comic artists in Serbia are very bad. So there were exhibitions where were fully female artists where they were not even signed. So even if you want to make kind of like to see someone or get to know a new artist, you couldn't because the practices are horrible. So we said we need to change this, and we actually need to find each other first. So we gathered a few people that we knew and then pulled up other women, and now we're trying also to change all of these practices. So yeah, we do mistakes, but we are the first community of artists in Serbia that is actually owning our mistakes and like trying to make this kind of work. So I would just say it's something also very new to us, but we're trying to deal with it in a bit different way than it's usually in Serbia.
Yeah, Donna mentioned playfulness in the name, Stripotetke, and then she gave us topics that are far from playful. So how do you remain playful? Or can you give us an example, like how do you represent this principle in Stripotetke apart from the name?
We had a very good mentor. There is a very good friend of ours, and she's dealing a lot with the publicity and how things are perceived, especially when you're a woman. And one of the first talks we had was like, okay, we don't want to get, like, the end of the story is not we are hysterical. The end of the story is, like, everything is hysterical and we're just pointing out at it. And she said, okay, you can do it by inviting playfulness, inviting jokes about all of these things, because you need to understand how feminism works and what are the moments that you can get once you start doing something. And usually it's really rejection from the part of the patriarchal society that we are in. So it was mostly that we had a lot of like wise women around ourselves that helped us to deal with these things. So playfulness mostly by making a joke about things that are maybe even more serious, but also that we know that this is not how it should be. So that we keep in mind not to get drowned by all of this, because you can imagine in the Balkans it's very draining. Like you do something and it comes back, and you do something, it's come back. So we decided this will be our way of working, basically.
We had a presentation about distributing books and being very creative to find an audience. So in this very patriarchal society in Serbia, how can you find an audience? Did you have to innovate in that, or what do you have strategies or questions?
As for strategies, I think we are winging it because we have little practical experience. I think most of us come from the world of art, and we are learning how to be publishers as we're doing the job. What we did have for our first book, At Home, so it's an anthology that brings together 11 artists, we managed to find partners who helped us publish it. So we co-published it with a local publisher, Besna Kobila. but we also had funds and support from several organizations, notably the French Institute in Serbia, who is our biggest, they're our very big partner. Then, of course, the Student Cultural Center from Novi Sad, Komunikart agency from Pančevo, who are also organizers of the Nova Festival in Pančevo, comic festival, and an organization, Femix, it's like a young women's organization. They promote women in art and mostly music, but they are trying to branch out as well. So I think that through them, we've actually managed to not cater to the good old comic audience that we know in Serbia, which are usually now older guys. They were young once. Now they are not as young, who like to collect comics. They like only certain kinds of comics. Some like superheroes, some like Bonelli, and they collect only that, and they don't have eyes for anything else. But we wanted to reach out, we wanted to speak to women, we wanted to speak to people who are looking for something fresh, and to younger generations as well. So I think we managed actually to touch people and generations who were blind to this kind of author type of comic, like very artistic.
Thank you. In the talks previously, playfulness and being funny have been mentioned, both by Nicola and by Rita. So I would like to ask you guys to feel free to repeat some thoughts because this will be a separate YouTube video. In your practices, how do you incorporate playfulness and not complaining, but the opposite? What's the opposite of not complaining? I'm Hungarian, I don't even know that. Proactive. Thank you. I learned a new thing. One of you.
I was just thinking about, and this is reflecting really on what you're talking about, and the funny names and aunties and the role of the aunties, and that you're already becoming role models. And I think one of the things about, as you establish your roles or our roles, we do have authority and we do have opportunities. And one of the big feminist rules is you throw down the ladder. And I think that's when you're on a stage and you can be a bit foolish and forget things. You're giving permission. You're saying, look, I have the authority. I can do this. Look what I've done. You've got your backstory, But then you can also, I don't know, fool around. But then a part of that is bringing the younger generation up. So if there's the other side of that, or part of that is if you're really busy and an opportunity comes your way and you can't do it. I can't do it on this occasion, but I know someone who can, and you're bringing in people. So I think that's my answer.
I never thought about it until this minute, so let's see what happens. I guess for me it's always just very important to put the works and the artists in the focus or in the center of everything. And then, I don't know, I think the creative process itself maybe is playful, and then create possibilities for the audience of other people to connect to that. And maybe the forms that we find, one can call playful in that sense, just because I think, just the parts of getting inspired, becoming creative, they have this element. And I think this is something that I would like to share with Rotopol and to create spaces for experiencing this, and maybe that's my answer.
Yeah, I think there is a challenge in all communities of sharing a creativity or a playfulness that is in the process and in the community with those people who are not part of the process and not part of the community. And that can be very tricky because each of us work in different traditions and different cultural interactions, regardless of which countries we are coming from. So this is a very long question. Can you remember, this is open to all of you, can you remember any instances of practices where you felt that you really successfully could share the values of your communities to a kind of audience that you did not expect, or that a strategy that worked really well, so that it is worth sharing it now?
I would say that the WOMCOM conference was one moment of it, because I was kind of a mentor to people that were my age, which was ridiculous in the sense of me teaching someone something. So, yeah, and then I was thinking, what is the way to approach these people? We are in a place that probably no one of us ever came. It was Podgorica, but like we don't usually meet like this. And then I said, okay, there needs to be some kind of vulnerability. And it needs to come from me, because I am the one that needs to kind of guide, and I need to like hold everything together. But I'm not alone there. There is 12 or 13 of us there. So if I am vulnerable enough to tell them, okay, guys, this is what I know. This is the end of it. But maybe you also know something, and then we can make it a collective knowledge group. I think this was the strategy that actually worked very well. I'm so happy with how it ended. Because I learned a lot, but I also heard that they learned a lot from each other, which was the whole point. But in the beginning, I was not thinking of it as, oh, I'm going to dare to tell them I don't know everything. But then it was a strategy that helped us know much more altogether, because I didn't know everything. If I just showed there, like, oh, I'm the master of the thing, I don't think anybody would go out with more knowledge. So that was my approach to the situation.
Can I just second that? I think that humility, or when you start off with what can I learn rather than what can I give rather than what can I take? You know, rather than what can I teach? So, I worked on a British Council project called Creating Heroines, working with a group there were 5 artists from Nepal, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and myself. And I felt quite awkward in a way, because it was about gender experiences of being a woman and using cartoons. And it started with that thing of you say your own deepest. I mean, in a way, I'm very lucky, because I can start saying my child died and I made work of it, so it makes them think, bloody hell. So then it opens the doors. By putting your own vulnerability, they could share theirs. But I learned so much. For example, I said, what about, because we had to produce that, what about if we all do tea towels, put the designs, and they were going, what is a tea towel? So I came with my kind of Western cultural assumptions, and that happened again and again. The things that, you know, I can sit in a park, and they were saying, "There's not a chance." One artist from Pakistan. There's not a chance we can sit in a park as women, and I'm like, "What do you mean?" So again, it's that sharing of assumptions and being open to being humble about the assumptions that you have, particularly a different culture.
Eva, I would like to bring your platform of comics journalism into the discussion, and I have 2 questions. So one of them is, because we've started sharing personal stories, so when you do comics journalism, how personal can you be? And the second question is, when you are an editor, is this something that you look for, or it doesn't matter to you as an editor?
Well, it's complex, because I also make stories myself. But I think one rule for me is you can be as personal as you want, but it has to be interesting for other people as well. So if it becomes some kind of a self-therapy thing, then it's not interesting to other people. But if it's recognizable for other people, and they can see themselves in that story, maybe, or parts of it, then it's worth making those stories.
I don't have it in my notes. When did you start drawing the Times?
In 2015.
2015. Okay, so that's almost 10 years.
Yes.
And in your presentation, we learned that so it's not only a website, but projects within the community. Yes. So what is something that you didn't expect as an outcome
Yeah, when I started it, I really wanted to grow and to become the leading platform in the world in comics journalism, and then it's a lot of work, and sometimes the message can be very small, but that's all that you need. So, and if it's shared by a few people, it's also very worthwhile. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to go viral or something like this. That doesn't mean anything to me. But if someone comes up to me and says, "I read this story and I have the same kind of experience," or "I met someone else," blah blah blah, it can be a ripple in the ocean that's growing. So I think the personal, the interaction, and reaching out to people that you would otherwise never meet. If I can succeed doing that, then I think it's successful. And I don't care if someone in Canberra would read a story and I would never hear about it.
Yeah, thank you. I lost my questions. Yeah, somewhere. Yeah. So because we are coming from very different countries, and we have heard about the background of patriarchal comic society in Serbia, and you guys each do very different things like publishing. Nicola is teaching and organizing and a website. So in your own contexts, was there a moment of you guys consciously going against the tradition? And if there was, what was the value that you really wanted to change with your own practice of editor, artist? Yes. So I'm really interested in whether you, from the beginning, thought of your own practice as a possible intervention, or it just happens if you do something new. Yeah.
So, well, as I mentioned in the talk a little bit, there was that moment where everyone was telling, just like there is no market for the books that the works that you are interested in. That kicked off a little bit to found the publishing house and to see if that's true or not. And I think it turned out it was not true, because at the beginning the idea was always there to just start creating infrastructure for the works, like create possibilities, like platforms to make it visible in so many different ways. As a book, of course, because books have the possibility to travel the world. Like you can pack it in an envelope and ship it to any place if you want to. Whether exhibitions, it's a bit more complicated. We still do it, but it's not one envelope, but maybe 3 big boxes or something. So it's a bit more complicated, but also that's a different kind of interaction. So it was always the idea to just build structures that are fun to us, that we like to do, and to think about possibilities to display the work, to make it accessible. But at the same time, there was always the idea or the aim, and at the beginning it was so far away, to connect to the structures that are already there and that we value. For example, we have a very great system of independent bookstores in Germany, and there was from the beginning the idea to connect to this structure. It took some years to get like a professional distribution. It's a lot of work. It also costs quite a lot, but I still think it's worth it because this is the places where I see these books and I think they belong there. And so it was always like these two things and just balancing in between, like what's possible at the moment and what is the aim and where can we go. And I think now it's really great to see that it worked out. I think at the beginning we really had to grow our own audience, and we got books back from bookstores with letters telling us like this is impossible, like this is shit, you would say maybe. Please send us proper comic books instead. And well, we still have them, but we didn't get these letters in many years. And even won some like awards, like governmental awards. And we only do the books that we do, right? So it must have been a change that is not only due to us, but also all the communities around and all the other publishers that are working in the same field. And I think there was really a change in Germany in the perspective of graphic storytelling as an art form. And I think that's really great, but it was a lot of work from a lot of people, and we're just a tiny part of it, and just keep pushing in the same direction, because I think that's just what drives us. Like, we really want this, and then we just see where we hit the wall and how we can go through it, around it, over it, under it, I don't know. Move it or paint it, I don't know. Just do something with it.
Before you said that you accept some parts of the culture that already there, you said that you have to create the culture that's fun for you. So can you, with a few words, describe what is fun for you? You said it, sorry.
Almost everything about it, actually. I mean, running a business is also a serious thing, and it comes with like financial risks, and you cannot foresee the future and all these parts. But I think what really is the core of the work, like collaborating with artists, talking about their books, just being there for the exchange, talking about printing techniques, deciding on paper, on like all these things, I think is really fun. And also all the events that we do, the travels, I love every bit and piece of it. And I also do love the bookkeeping, so it's really, I love, yes. So that's all the fun parts. The not fun parts is like you never know, like if there's maybe a new law coming alongside that keeps you nights with reading through documents and trying to understand what you have to implement in your website the next year or something. I don't know, there's always things that are maybe not fun, but I think the really core of publishing the works and promoting the works and organizing things around the books, I like all of them actually. Yep.
Thank you. So I'm rephrasing the question that's for all of you before we forget. That was what aspect of your tradition is something that you are continuing, and what is the intervention that you are bringing about? And Nicola, you are the next one.
Well, it's actually continuing a tradition of feminism, which is creating women-only stuff. So it's not really challenging. So my example is, so I collected works for the Inking Woman, which is the book, the history of women's cartoons and comics in the UK, right? So there's 2 or 3 artists, women artists, who got quite annoyed. Why would I want to be part of a women-only publication? You know, this is the 21st century kind of approach. And it's really, really hard to make them understand meritocracy. Like, why is that a problem? So, I don't know. Okay, yes, I completely agree with that. It shouldn't have to be women only. However, when there's equality, but just look at the publishers, the present company accepted, look at the publishers, look at the gallerists, look at the industry as a whole, and just see who's there. And if you can't see yourself, that's why we need to have women-only events, activities, publications.
Should I say something? I think in my case, it's journalism. Lately, we've heard a lot about fake news, and people don't trust the media anymore, or they are in this bubble or in that bubble. And I think if you have drawn stories from people's experiences and bringing the context of the story, bringing background stories, then you can build a bridge between those 2 bubbles. And also, drawings don't lie. It's what it is. And I think that's something in this time that can be very important to add to the existing news outlets. And also now with the artificial intelligence, I also think that hand-drawn stories are very upright and real, and that's how we can make a change in existing journalism.
What do you mean drawings don't lie?
Well, of course you can draw a person looking like a dragon or something. But why would you, if you make a drawn story, why would you why would you want to lie? I mean, if you start making drawn stories, it's because you need to tell this kind of thing. It's not that you want to convince someone of something that doesn't exist. It's because you have the need to tell this story.
Yeah, for me it was a bit from. So I moved to Belgium where I did my master's and I started making this graphic novel about bombing of Serbia when we were 9 years old. Me and Jana. So I wanted to make this story and then I realized after doing a PhD on the similar topic, representation of childhood, blah, 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 I realized if I go back with this book, there is nobody who will actually understand what I want to say with this book because the society is very historically charged. And my book is not historically charged. My book tries to really be nuanced in things. And I thought, like, okay, if I bring this book and nobody is going to read it because the average reader likes the story about First World War or Second World War that is really, you know the sides, you know who is at fault and stuff like this. Like, what am I going to do with this book? And then I realized, okay, we need a different kind of audience. So I started making stories that can touch ordinary people that want to think about different perspectives. So part of my kind of challenging traditional things was also participating in this book at home that brought totally different perspectives and women, and not only women, are recognizing themselves in it. And this is like, it's funny to say, but this is the only anthology that brings stories from the house that are made locally that are about things that we can see or recognize. And it's not like somebody translating Marjan Satrapi or somebody bringing you a story from somewhere else that you can find yourself in, but really people from around yourself. So I think that our challenge of traditional happened in this sense, that we brought stories that people can actually understand and see themselves inside.
Yes, first I want to say that it's a very good question. So many layers in one seemingly simple question. I would like to maybe continue on what Dragana was saying. So for me, I do have the continuation in the sense where I want to continue the tradition of comics in my country, which is very rich, and I think it's very important and unfortunately historically neglected from like the perspective of cultural politics on the state level. So that's something that I would like to continue and enhance, hopefully, although there is not much hope to be had currently, unfortunately, with the political situation. But as for changes on a personal level, where I'm breaking tradition, for example, is when I was growing up and dreaming of becoming a comic artist as a young girl, the comic world in an artistic sense was very rigid. So if you wanted to be a professional, you needed to draw like Giraud, you needed to be or imitate Mobius, or if you want to do superhero comics, you have to do it like Marvel, DC school. And it's only after I actually started getting well into my 30s that I've kind of had this awakening, because I've met Dragana and all the other wonderful creative souls in this other part of the comic world that I didn't know, because I started in mainstream comics, French mainstream comics. I've realized I really enjoy being more fluid with my art, changing up styles, adapting for each project. And people were warning me like, oh, you won't get any work, you won't get you won't get hired if you change styles. But in fact, no. From the moment that I actually embraced and not only the changes of style, but I actually kind of understood it as growing and evolving of my inner self. I feel like I'm on the greatest path that I've ever been on. So like not being rigid, being fluid.
I love how this topic of going against the assumptions of our cultures is returning from most of the answers. And with my last question, I would like to return back to what Dragana mentioned regarding your own book project, that you try to get rid of the assumptions and tell your personal and also historical story to a new audience. And so my question to all of you would be, because there are many representatives from many countries with many interests here, but what we all need is audience, because we don't survive without them. So can you think of a good example that you experienced where you could engage a new audience, where a new door opened for a new audience in your practice?
I would actually love to answer this. The internet and Instagram helped me a lot. Especially, I think, during the pandemic, when I was on a 6 month hiatus and quite depressed because I didn't have any income and any work, I started working on personal things, like little tidbits about my personal life, about my marriage, my mixed marriage, and our little funny situations that we encounter in our daily lives with the meshes of different cultures, because my husband is Croatian, so you know, like those two countries are still very charged, and we beat that with humor in our daily lives. And I was making comics about that, like very sketchy, horribly drawn comics, and people loved them. They loved them, and I sometimes have like pretty you know, punchy jokes that some people get offended, but most of, like, and I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. And people loved them. So I think that was quite liberating.
So finding new audiences, that was the question.
Yeah, for me this is an easy question because I also teach a lot. Like I'm assisting at the university, and I think it's the same happened with Judith. Like Judith Van Istendel, it's a good friend of Eva and my supervisor, and now I call her my dear friend because she was the one insisting on the story of a bombing. Like it needs to be out, you need to say it. And when I saw her work firstly, I was like, this is not appealing at all. Like, eh? And then I got to know the person, and then I said, okay, this person, these stories must be good, but the stories were in Dutch. So I Google translated them with really going with the Google, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then now I love her storytelling in general, because now I got to understand this person, and the way that she's telling stories, it's beautiful. It was my uneducated brain that thought like, yeah, it's some drawings. But then when you get to know your teacher or your mentor or something, and you understand the person, and I think that happens also with my work. When people first see it, maybe they're not very amazed or something, but when they start talking about topics that I talk about, they get more interested. And then it's also the culture I grew up in. Like, if it's not the most beautiful Marvel, DC, whatever, then it's not worthy. And now I changed my idea of, oh, I want to know what is the story about, and I want to, like, Naomi has this story, I read it 2 days ago, it's such a beautiful story. I was so happy. Like, now I can appreciate, because I understood that this person is way more complex, then I go and I really, like, I enjoy the story much more just because of it. So, I don't know, kind of meeting an author helps me connect with them as an audience, myself, not as an author. That's my kind of way of. I went to blabbing now, but
No. It made sense. It made sense.
made sense.
Don't
Okay.
worry.
So to summarize, you think that getting to new audiences, artists should maybe be more present in the physical world and go like to meet their audience in order to...
Yeah, more approachable,
Maybe.
I would say. But I think all the artists are approachable. It's also audience that needs to kind of believe it. So that's my... Yeah, thanks.
Can I? I was just wanted to talk about two examples in the UK. The Hungarians are leading, just to flag up. One is Eszter Simovari, who is a comics artist, and she lives in Newcastle, and she's devised this scheme where she has a kind of trolley, which is a library of her collection of graphic novels and comics, and she just sort of wanders around the park. It just makes me think, Eszter, you've just got to be careful. And she just is she's like a missionary. She's just chatting to people and they say, but comments. And she's a very outgoing, lovely, warm person. But that's one way. She's literally reaching you. And there's another Hungarian, Gabby, who has set up graphic novel reading room. And so she's taking her part, doing exactly the same. It's something about Hungarians and their collection of books, just roaming around saying, read this. But audience is really important. And then the other point is that the stories find the audiences themselves. So if you have a graphic novel about cancer, then it's reaching beyond the comics readers. And I think that naturally happens, and that's what you were saying. It's got to go. The story has to be bigger than yourself. If it's
I can think about a project that we did about a highway that was made in the Netherlands in the 1980s, and it went straight through nature, through a piece of wood. And the Netherlands is such a densely populated country. We don't have real nature. It's all planted or organized. So there was a lot of protest against this highway, and we did a project when we invited governmental organization, someone from the forest, also farmers who had their farms nearby, and people that were using the road. So we interviewed people from all kinds of perspectives on the subject, and that's something that we try to do to broaden the audience and reach out to people that would normally not read comics. And sometimes they're very skeptical, because we also did a project in the Lakes District where there were a lot of floodings, and we called to a lady and to interview her, and told her what we were doing, and she said, there's nothing funny about flooding, because a lot of people think that comics are funny. And that was interesting.
Just for everyone, this project that they did is on the website of Drawing the Times, and it's brilliant. So check it out. It's like you can read everything. It's brilliant.
Yes, so it's a complex question. I think with every new book, we reach new audience somehow. With every travels, where we come to a different place, and we also try to be in so many different contexts, like literature festivals, where people are very skeptical for comics first, but then in the conversation, this just vanishes, and then the next year they want to buy 6 books because they know a friend and someone, and one for themselves. But I think maybe to share the place that we have in Kassel, the small bookstore, it's maybe a good example, because the door in the summer, the door is open. We always have a bench standing outside. On the other side of the street, there's a grocery store, and it's a very vivid street, and people just rest on our bench and drink some water, or just rest from carrying the groceries or whatever. And every now and then someone peeks inside who was never there before. And at the beginning, even people thought we were a copy shop or a tobacco store, because illustration, they saw it like illustrated magazines or something. And that really changed over the years. So, but every now and then still someone is stepping in. Like this year, we're like, oh, is this a new store? And we're like, oh, we are here for 17 years now, so not so new. And they're like, no, that cannot be. I live around the corner for 20 years. Like, well, we decorated the window display in a new way, maybe. That's it, because, like, what do you say in that case? Like, are you blind? Like, maybe something changed. But actually, we are here. And then it's nice to be there, to just be there and be open to speak about the books, because people have no clue what they have to expect when coming in and finding like all the images on the books covers. And I think, yeah, just having the store involved a lot of people and changed at least the perspective in that town, and through the travels also in other places. And I think maybe there you can trace a little bit like where we all went, and then the connections, the network has really grown from that we move in.
Thank you so much. I really love this image of taking a rest on the bench of comics. And it's a very nice image for me, especially at the end of this very long day. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. Thank you for the organizers of organizing WOMCOM and also this festival. Let's give a big round of applause to the ladies.